Welcome to Identifying Stages of Language Loss and Suggested Interventions. Today our speaker is Cree Rashula. She is the Native Language Community Coordination Training and Technical Assistance Director, and she serves as an in-house expert on Native language and revitalization efforts, second language acquisition, and best teaching practices here at Sister Sky, Inc. She utilizes her diverse experience in mentor-apprentice, immersion, early childhood development, and administrative partnerships to support the needs of our NLCC cohort in various capacities. So Cree has been around language her whole life. At the age of 7, she began learning in a formal capacity with elder fluent speakers of NLCC. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yep.
Okay. These elder fluent speakers traveled to her school in Inchelium, Washington on the Cabo Indian Reservation to deliver language lessons to her class. And her parents were also second language learners and teachers there too. So Cree has been teaching language since she was 15, and she also has a Head Start teacher and understands early childhood, and she's also been a curriculum developer and program manager. So let's go on to the next slide. So I'll go ahead and let Cree begin. The prayer, it's the prayer one, Cree. We can't see it.
White hypnotic seal, and try squeeze some hygienic, use some color squeeze. And try squeeze Crewell Shula, use some color squeeze some hygienic. My name is Crewell Shula, and my ancestral name is Grizzly Bear in the Water. I come from Inchelium, Washington on the Cabo Reservation, where my mother's line is from. And like Maria said, I grew up. I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper first for you all to get an understanding for this webinar in particular, because I want people to understand my role as the TTA director is not necessarily coming in knowing all the answers. It's coming in with a lot of experience and seeing what does and does not work, and working through the mistakes and going down a path and finding out, oh, geez, that didn't work. Going down another path, oh, geez, that didn't work. And so hopefully this will help you all to be able to fine-tune your strategies and to not make all the some similar mistakes that we have made in our area. Like Maria mentioned, the first word I remember understanding in my language, my earliest memory is at the age of 4, but it was 7 years old is when I really started to actually learn, or to be active, I guess, in my language revitalization efforts. And so my parents, both of them are second language learners and teachers, and so they kind of brought me up in that revitalization effort, and I got to spend a lot of time. I actually skipped school to spend time at my tribe's language program, being able to be around fluent elders, and they kind of guinea pigged me with a lot of teaching methodologies. The gray morning technique was kind of new at that time. A lot of TPR type of activities that we would do, and a lot of cultural activities as well. And so ever since then, I've always been involved in language. Whether that's learning materials development, administrative duties, being an actual I've been an immersion school teacher, Head Start teacher, taught at college level. And so hopefully today I can shed some light on some things that might be helpful for your program. So I'm going to start off with a prayer. I 100% believe that language revitalization is a ceremony of healing. And so how I've been taught is that when you are in ceremony or preparing for ceremony, that you have to get your mind in a positive state and to not put bad thoughts or bad feelings onto other people. And I feel like, being in this is sacred work that we do. And so before we get started, I would like to open it up that way. Oranchun Kupis Pik Puistet Merican Tamhik Poitet Kukursis Poistet Apnat Kalkat Mihastik Poitet Buhitachtak Spachbachtet Miluk Sinlitamentum Buhitachtak Kuchkachtet Mini Ipkuch Hatmesti Tori Ayati Kas Hasti All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So Maria was mentioning that I'm actually home today, so if you hear some background noises, I apologize. I have 4 children and a husband, and so they're going about their day. I am on my phone, my hotspot. I'm probably like a lot of you. I'm in a rural area, so internet access isn't always the best, and so today it's just not working at all, so I'm on my phone. So Maria is actually my eyes and ears as far as controlling the slides and stuff. So
okay.
Please be patient with us on that. So
Super.
if we can move on to are we on the webinar?
Sure. Not yet.
Okay.
Just a minute. I want to mute.
Oh, okay.
I want to mute everybody, and then I'll move forward. So just a moment while I mute everybody.
Oh.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, and I believe I unmuted you, Cree, so please say something.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. All right. We are on the webinar goal and objective slides now.
All righty. So hopefully, as a result of this webinar, you all will be able to identify some additional strategies and tools to identify where your own language is at, and also to get a better understanding of strategies that will align with your language status. And to not only that, but just to utilize your information to inform your project planning and then developing for current or future projects or strategic planning as a whole. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So my assumption is that everybody's goal, their long-term goal, is to reach intergenerational language transfer. And so the typical measure of the health of a language is not only the youngest speaker, but also the intergenerational transfer between those languages. And so what we're all striving for is to have children speak our language and to have not just the children, but also their parents and their grandparents speaking between one another. And so this is a quote from Joshua Fishman. I'm going to be using a lot of his work. He's a world-renowned linguist who worked in his own endangered language, which is Yemen. And my apologies, somebody tried calling me and it threw me off the slide. Okay, his language was Yemen, and so he has a lot of great information that guides a lot of indigenous language revitalization efforts as well. So this is a great quote. I thought the road to societal death is paved by language activity that is not focused on intergenerational continuity. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. And this is an updated, Joshua Fishman had created this endangerment scale. And so the original scale was 1 to 10, which this one is 2, but there wasn't any subdomains. This one's called the Expanded Graded Intergenerational Disruption Scale. This is developed by Joshua Fishman, like I mentioned. And so a lot of indigenous language programs, at least in the United States and Canada, are usually around the 8B through 6B. And some of them are even dormant or even extinct. But a lot of language programs that I've worked with are around the 8 or 7 stages of endangerment. And so the 8 levels is when your speakers, all your first language speakers, are elderly. There's not a lot of people within the childbearing generation who can use the language. And so you only have just that one generation, and they're all elder status. And then the 7 is when the childbearing generation can use the language amongst themselves, but they do not normally transmit it to their children. A 6B threatened, the language is still used orally within all generations, but there is a significant threat to sustainability, particularly a break in transmission to the next generation by a significant portion of the childbearing generation. And then 6A, the language is used orally by all generations and is normally learned by children as their first language. I don't see a whole lot of indigenous languages at a lower level than that one, because then it starts to be as educational. Like the Hawaiians, they have universities in their in their language, stuff like that. It's in the workplace. There's also dormant. Dormant, the difference between dormant and extinct is that dormant, there's still documentation of it, and you'll be able to, there is an ability to wake it back up based off of that documentation and kind of piece it back together. Extinct is really, there's nothing that wasn't documented. It's just, there's no way that you can even attempt to revitalize that language. Okay, I think that's all I have for that one. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So there's various factors that play into where your language is at. Like I mentioned before, the intergenerational language transmission. If you have 1,000 language speakers and they're all 60 or older, that's much different than if you have 1,000 language speakers and your youngest is like 2 years old, because you'll have more time with the younger speakers. I don't like saying that, but that's kind of where the reality lies with that. So how many generations are speaking the language? The absolute number of speakers. So like I said, the 1,000, both of them would be the 1,000 speakers in that example I just used. Proportion of the speakers within the total population. So if you have, 10 speakers, but your tribal membership is only 300, that's going to be a higher percentage than if you have 10 speakers and your tribal membership is 10,000. So that's something to think about. Trends existing in the domain. So where is it currently being accessed, being used, being taught? Is that in the universities, public schools? Is it used within the homes? Response to new domains in media. That is F5. So that's kind of like radio stations or television, technology. Is it being brought into the quote unquote modern time type of a thing? Materials for language education and literacy. Is there materials that are existing within your language? Government language policies. I think that could be counted towards both at the federal level, at the state level, and at the tribal level. Are there any policies regarding your language? Is it acknowledged on a state level or federal level? Does your tribe have they declared the language their official language? Type of things. F8, community's attitudes towards their own language. That's really important, because if your community doesn't value it and they don't think it's important, then efforts are going to be really hard to, communities can be very big in supporting your efforts. And then the amount and quality of documentation. Is it written? Is it recorded? Do you guys have archives in your language? And so we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. And this slide is an example. So this is, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but this is the factors of loss of the Melayusini in the Netherlands. And so their F1 factor, language transmission only between first and second generation. F2, there's about 50 speakers total. F3, proportion of speakers is less than 1% of the total population. F4, confined to colloquial, non-official domains. F5, weekly bilingual radio program. F6, no materials for language education and literacy. F7, the Dutch government only acknowledges national languages. F8, Melayusini is cripple Malay. I'm not sure what that means. F9, there's one PhD thesis, one master's thesis, and a few papers. Okay, so those are just some kind of factors to consider when identifying where your language is at. So, thank you, Maria. So, suggested interventions by stage. So, depending on where your language is at, you're going to have different intervention strategies. And ideally, you want children to pick up conversational proficiency in their ancestral language at the home before they ever reach school. So the core of it is planted, the seed is planted in the home, and then it should spread out to the schools, to the community, to higher education, and go from there. And if it's not at home, then in language nest is suggested by Rainier. We'll go ahead and I agree with my experience. I feel like that's a really ideal solution. So we'll go ahead and switch to the next slide. So follow the stages. Joshua Fishman emphasizes to not get too gung-ho. I know if you're like in an 8A stage, like you only have elder speakers, and you go and you visit an immersion school and you see how awesome those kids are doing, I know it's super exciting. And you're like, oh, we need an immersion school. But all you have are fluent elder speakers. You really have to follow those stages in order to get to that stage of immersion school. You should go from an 8B to an 8A to a 7, like that. Otherwise, there can be, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse in a sense. And so, in other words, quoting Joshua Fishman, using the language in formal education will not reverse the language shift unless the grandparents talk to their children and grandchildren in the local language. So I'll talk more about that and explain that a little bit more as we later on in this webinar. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So the needs assessment. So I would suggest everybody develop their own way of conducting a needs assessment. So some things to consider, how many first language speakers you have of your language. I don't use the word, just so you understand my own terminology, I typically won't use the word fluent. There's a lot of, I feel like there's two definitions. There's a technical definition and a cultural definition. So cultural definition, fluent are first language speakers. Second language speakers can be fluent, but that it's not their first language. So that's how I kind of differentiate between the two. So either of those can be fluent speakers, but I want to identify we have first language and second language learners or speakers. So figuring out how many first language speakers you have, and then identifying how many people are actively learning it as a second language, and then also identifying how many people are interested in learning the language. Figuring out, is there a curriculum or is there curriculum already developed? What are all the resources that you have, the documentation, PhD theses, linguistic stuff, kind of figuring out what's all documented. And then are there current classes happening in your community or even outside of your community? Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So one way to gather this information is through speaker surveys. So here's some information that you might put on a survey, or this is the information you'll be wanting to solicit at a basic level. Try to keep your surveys as short as possible. And then what we did when I was the language program manager for the Colville Tribe, we had a grant through the Potlatch Fund that was basically doing this, a needs assessment. And so what we would do is we would piggyback up, we call them district meetings. And so every quarter, our communities, we have a large reservation, so we have 4 main communities. And so once a quarter, they would hold meetings with the council, would update the community on what's going on. And so I would piggyback off of those meetings, and I would bring a survey similar to this one, and I would say, hey, I have this survey, we have some raffle items, can you fill this out? And when you turn this in, we'll put you in a name draw for a raffle item, which is like blankets and bags and cool stuff. And so that was one way that we got surveys back. And then we also did online surveys, and we also offered incentives for that as well. And so just simple, what is your current age? Are you a first language speaker, second language speaker? Do you know of other speakers? And then having them self-identify, in their own language proficiency. One thing to note about that is if you're going to ask if they know of other speakers, you might want people to identify themselves in some way, so we're not double counting, if that makes any sense. because if multiple people or if a fluent speaker is filling it out and somebody names them, then they get kind of counted twice, if that makes any sense. So just be mindful of that type of stuff that can happen. But simple, surveying people, offer incentives. People really don't like surveys. So try to make it as short and offer incentives as possible. So we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. This is
before we do, Tom Allen has raised his hand, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody since I don't know what his phone number is.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, Tom, go ahead and ask your question. Tom, are you there? Is everybody unmuted?
Hello? All guests have been unmuted.
There we go. All right. I must have clicked the thing twice. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Tom. Tom, did you have a question for Cree?
Oh my God.
Tom Allen?
Hello?
Yes?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, we can.
Okay. Are you going to send these slides out to everybody on the webinar?
Yes.
Or are they going to be available somehow?
Yeah, we are actually recording this webinar, so the webinar will be available in a few days on our website at ananlcc.org, and then you'll also be able to download the slides as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to mute everybody back up again, and then we'll keep going.
All guests have been muted.
Okay, Cree, are you unmuted? Cree, are you there? All right, make sure I pick the right phone number here. Yeah? Oh.
Hello.
Okay, now try it. Now try it. There you go.
Okay,
there you are, Cree.
You gotta unmute me.
Yes, I'm unmuted you now.
Okay.
Sorry about that. All right, I'll go to the next slide now.
Thank you.
Cherokee Speaker Book.
So, yes. So part of my role here is to provide training and technical assistance for a cohort of 5 grantees. So one of the grantees I work with is Cherokee Nation. And so I thought that this was something that is a really less boring way and a more powerful way to engage in data collection for your speakers. So part of their community outreach is that they consulted specialists in books. So to create a signature book of all the first language speakers that they have. And so the original, this was originally designed to collect an accurate account of first language Cherokee speakers, and not just in Oklahoma, but also the Eastern Band of Cherokee and all the different bands and tribes that they have. And then they also wanted to recognize and honor first language Cherokee speakers, and they wanted to increase their community readiness. And so, go ahead and go to the next slide, Maria. And so what they did was they started holding dinners throughout all of their community, their jurisdictional areas. And so the dinners focused on honoring Native Cherokee speakers, and then the speakers signed an archival registry book and received a Cherokee speaker medallion that featured Sequoia, who was the creator of the Cherokee Syllabary. And so the book has gone to Oklahoma, it's gone to North Carolina and the surrounding communities to collect signatures from the Eastern Band as well. And so this really sparked a lot of pride, I feel like, within their communities. Even up here, I was seeing a lot on my social media about pictures of first language speakers wearing their medallions, their family members talking about how proud they were of them. And so the book is still available for speakers to sign. It's taken to homebound Cherokee speakers when necessary. And so this book was created to last at least 500 years. It's that high of a quality of a book. And so what I thought was really cool, I feel like a lot of it was designed to create awareness of their language situation, but it turned into a really neat tool to collect the status on where they're at in their language. And so I just thought that it was a really neat way that it increased a lot of their community support in their language. And it's just a really neat way to gather that information. And so somebody had mentioned to me, I had brought it up because where I'm from, we have my own language, but we also have sister languages. We're called the Southern Interior Salish tribes. And so there's about 5 of us. And I was like, oh, I want to do that, within our own Southern Interior Salish people. And somebody had mentioned, well, we should do a second book, one book for the first language speakers, and then a second book for people who commit to learning it as a second language. So like people like myself and other younger generation people who are in this work to sign their own name and say, I'm committed to revitalizing this language. And then, so then you're also collecting the second language speakers as well in what I think is a really powerful way. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next. So here's another source. This is the Endangered Languages, Project. And so if you go in here and you search your language, it'll kind of give you an idea. Can we go back to the slides, Maria? So I just wanted to show everybody an example of my own language. So keep in mind that what they show you on this site is probably about 10 years old. So, and there's going to be different sources. So for Okanagan, they classify it as endangered. And then they in this source, is the First Peoples Language Map of British Columbia, First Peoples Cultural Council, that's where this source comes from, is that there is 149 native speakers worldwide, and that was about 10 years ago. So then they have the extant population as well, 4,500 in British Columbia. That does not count the United States. We're on both sides of the border. And then they also have a guesstimate of semi-speakers, so people who aren't first language fluent speakers but who are getting there, which is about 797. And so what I wanted to do with you all is, if you can type in the name of your language, we can try to search it up. I wanted to do a live search to see if we can just show you really quick how this works. So if you are interested, go ahead and type in the name of your language. And Maria, I'm going to have to rely on you a little bit for this.
I can't see anybody typing in the name of their language. And that's unless Tom can switch you back over really quick, because I can't get to the lobby again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got Yurok and Dakota. Oh, dude, they're all popping in there. Okay. So let's go. Let's try the first 3. Yurok, Dakota, and Lakota.
So I just put it up there in the search, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay, so we'll start with Yurok. One result. And here's what we got. Can you guys see that?
So that link, though, if you go to that link, you can search yourself. And then, so if you see, you can see these arrows it says language information by source, and below that there's arrows kind of going to the left and the right. So you click on those little arrows and it'll show you multiple sources on like the status of your language. So it's not just one source. So this isn't going to be 100% accurate, but you can use this as a guide to kind of approximately where your language is at. So I would agree personally with this, just knowing my community and being around, I would say it's definitely endangered. I know that those numbers have gone down, the 149. fluent speakers. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. I'm sorry, guys. I was hoping to do something a little bit fun, but all right. So here is going back to that intergenerational disruption scale. This is not only the EGID scale, but it's also suggested interventions next to it. So if you are at a stage 8, and this goes back to the original scale, and this one goes up to only goes up to a stage 8. So when you only have a few elder speakers in the language left, what they suggest doing is to implement a language apprentice model, where fluent elders are teamed up with one-on-one with young adults who want to learn language. If you're at a stage 7 and only adults beyond the childbearing age speak the language, you'll want to establish language nests, modeled after the Maori and Hawaiian programs. And then stage 6, develop places in the community where language is encouraged, protected, and used exclusively. Encourage more young parents to speak the language in the home or with and around their young children. Stage 5, offer literacy in the minority language, promote voluntary programs in the schools and other community institutions to improve prestige and use of the language. I think that for those of you, if you're more at a stage 5 or 4, a lot of your efforts is going to be towards really upping that status and the prestige of it and making people see value in it to where they want to continue it. That's towards those lower levels. Stage 4, improve instructional methods using TPR, TPRS, and then other immersion teaching techniques. Teach reading and writing and higher level language skills. Develop 2 bilingual programs where appropriate, where non-speaker elementary students learn from indigenous language and speakers learn a national or international language. Stage 3, promote language by making it the language of work and use throughout the community. All right, so we'll go ahead and I don't know if anybody's in a stage 2 or a stage 1, but we'll go ahead and move on from there. If you're at a stage 2 or a stage 1, I don't know if you'll be watching this webinar, but if you are, good for you. All right, so diving a little bit deeper into, we'll go ahead and go to the next, no, I think I can, let me try. Okay, stage 8 strategies. Diving a little bit deeper into some of the strategies. I wanted to focus more, given the time, focus more on the more endangered languages first, and then work my way down. So stage 8, only a few elders speak the language. I really support this strategy in that stage. So if you have, if you're trying to teach children and you only have a few first language speakers, you run the risk of exhausting your elders because you're going to rely on them a lot too. I am of the opinion that elders, older elders, should not be teachers. They should be guides. They should be resources. They should be encouraged to speak and talk to you. But if you use them to try to teach younger children or to teach high school classes or something, they can get really exhausted and drained, and that's not a good way to use your elders. So really focusing on getting that transmission from them to the adult generation is going to be, and intensive like that. So let's go ahead and let me see if I can use this slide. So just so people know, you can also type questions into the chat bar, and we can answer those. Maria can keep track, and we can answer those at the end too if you do have a question. Okay, so Maria or Tom, if you can play the Mentor Apprentice video.
Welcome. Today we are going to talk about the Mentor Apprentice program. Mentor Apprentice is a unique program that is helping Indigenous languages in BC and around the world revitalize their languages. The purpose of this video is to give you an overview of the program and how it works. So, what is Mentor Apprentice? Mentor Apprentice is a one-on-one language immersion program where a motivated language learner works with a fluent speaker to learn their language. The purpose of the program is to create new language speakers who are committed to passing the language on to others in the community. The goal of the Mentor Apprentice program is for apprentices to gain language fluency using one-on-one language immersion techniques with their mentors. Mentor Apprentice focuses on oral language, not reading and writing. It's about being able to live life in the language. It's not about getting an A in language class. Teams focus on learning language needed for daily life so that they can bring the language back into their homes and their communities. The program is intensive and a big time commitment. Mentor Apprentice teams spend 300 hours together during their year in the program. This breaks down to 10 to 12 hours per week, or approximately 2 hours per day. Mentor Apprentice is all about doing activities together in the language, not about memorizing vocabulary or grammar in a classroom setting. Mentor Apprentice teams hold their language learning sessions in their homes and out on the land. The Mentor Apprentice program is meant for people who are committed to learning the First Nations language and to sharing the language they learn with others when they finish the program. The heart of Mentor Apprentice is language immersion. This means there is no English. The program does not use a translation approach. Instead, Mentor Apprentice teams commit to communicating only in the language, even if the apprentice is just a beginner. Here are 5 reasons why Mentor Apprentice is so great. First of all, it works. The Mentor Apprentice program actually creates language speakers. Language immersion is known to be the very best way to build language fluency. You don't need expensive books, materials, or classes. Mentors don't need to be teachers. Anyone who is fluent in the language can be a mentor. And best of all, you can do it at home on your own schedule. The Mentor Apprentice program is about living your life in the language. If you want to become a speaker of your First Nations language and are willing to commit the time and effort, then this is the program for you. Check out the Mentor Apprentice program page on our website at www.fpcc.ca or contact us.
If you search it, you can search it for yourself if you're interested. It's from the First Peoples Cultural Council, the Mentor Apprentice program. It's on YouTube. It's just a quick little 3-minute video. But basically the purpose is immersion sessions between an adult and an elder speaker. And to basically kind of bring it back to daily life. And so let me see. I'm going to go ahead and switch slides. So Mentor Apprentice is aimed at daily conversational activities. And so what I really like about this is that it really gives you an opportunity to also take care of your elders. And so you can take your elders shopping for their groceries. And so you're also giving back to them. And you talk about what you're shopping for, what you're going to use it for, and all the different things that you see within the store. You can go to their house and help with their chores while they narrate for you, or you can talk about what you're doing. Go to gather traditional foods, medicines with your elders. A couple activities that I have done, we did an intensive up in Canada where most of our speakers are at. And so we canned some fruit and some salmon as an immersion activity, and we filleted salmon to dry it. We call it stewing. It's like you fillet it and then you slice it, and then it's wind-dried salmon. That's really good. We've worked on hide tanning, medicine gathering, and making tinctures. So you really can use that opportunity to do a lot and not just work on language, but taking care of your elders, relearning cultural activities that we kind of get out of touch with in this modern society. But the important thing I feel like with the Mentor Apprentice is to plan, because you really can't throw a first language speaker and an adult in a room together and expect language to happen by osmosis. It really does take planning, okay, what do we want to learn? So you sit down with your elder speaker and say, these are the things that I'm interested in, or even asking them, what do you think that I should learn as for me, as a Skylish person, what's important for me to know? And then you bring in, this is what my interests are. I like to cook. Let's make some cooking videos, do some narrations together. And so really take that time to plan and prepare and to make your sessions with your elder as efficient as possible. Because if you go in, this is the saying that I really enjoy using for language, just in general, not just for the mentor apprentice, is that if you fail to plan, then plan to fail. Because a lot of these things, if you just throw it together and say, okay, speak, it's not going to happen. Or it will, but at a very, very slow, kind of like minuscule pace. So moving on to the next slide. Some elder considerations. The time for elder mentor sessions are typically 10 to 12 hours per week, and the elders are there to speak the language. So consult your elder for activities and plans, but I wouldn't recommend having them lead or come up with the plans themselves. Another thing to consider with doing mentor apprentice is that a little bit of background on how our brains develop. A lot of programs are geared towards replicating how we learn language in childhood. But some things to take into consideration with that is that around 6 months of age, your brain as a baby starts to prune the ability to hear sounds in other languages. So if you're learning your language as an adult, you're going to have a hard time hearing those sounds. So an example for my language, the word for our language is endangerment. And so since our X sound and a K are articulated in the same spot in the mouth, adult learners who aren't exposed to our language hear a K. So they don't say endangerment, they say endangerment. And so take into account that we really have to relearn sounds. And so make sure to take that into consideration. And then also even just sentence structure. In my own language, we have 5 different sentence structure, at least 5. So in English, it's always subject, verb, object. And so when you're an adult, that's what your brain has that pattern naturally. And so you kind of have to rewire your brain to different patterns and different sounds. So, so take it slow in the beginning and really pay attention to those sounds and those patterns that might be different. Okay, now I'm trying to speed it up a little bit. So stage 7, only adults beyond childbearing age speak the language. So the suggested strategy is to establish language nests or programs that allow parents to speak language to their children in an immersion environment. When you guys receive this, I was going to go to the website, but just for time, we only have about 10 minutes, and I wanted to be able to answer questions. We will send out this Language and Cultural Immersion Programs Handbook that's available online. It's a really comprehensive toolkit to use when establishing a language nest. One thing to note with language nests is that the purpose of these is not like academic, and so really to create a home-like environment. And what they say is to create an environment like you're going to grandma's house. You know, it's involving with clothes and eating and reading together, cuddling, you know, that type of stuff. Cleaning, it's not, you don't want to focus so much on like academics and ABC 1, 2, 3 type of stuff. Okay. So here's one thing that I did when I was the language program manager for the Cabo tribe. We have a lot of strong second language speakers, and so what I thought, okay, I know immersion is the most effective method of language transfer. And I know that language needs to be brought back to the home before we can start schools or enter into the public school type of thing. So what I did is I partnered with our TANF program, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I partnered not just with TANF, but with Head Start. So in the summertime, Head Starts are empty. There's no kids there. So I went to TANF and I said, hey, can we have TANF families participate in this language intensive? It's a pilot project. I just want to see kind of how it goes. And the purpose, I'm going to put in language instructors in each of those classrooms, and I'm going to throw 5 families. We have 3 languages on the Caldwell Reservation, so I'm going to put 5 families per language, and then we're going to have the instructors go through immersion, not just with the kids, but with the parents. So the parents had to be there, participate with their kids. And so we did this for about 6 weeks. It was like a typical Head Start schedule, so we went from 9 to 1 in each of the languages, and they did, the language instructors came up with little activities and routines to do with the families. And this only lasted 6 weeks. Like I said, it was a pilot project. I just wanted to see how it would go. We also didn't have like the resources to like create a language nest, right? I didn't have the funding at the time to do that, and I wanted to gain support from the results of the families that participated. So I wanted to show you all a video of one of the families that participated in our language nest. So in the video, you'll see I think she's about 2 years old in this video. Her name is Artisik, and her mom, they're at their home, so they're not in the language nest. They're in their home, and so I wanted to show you, this is within that 6 weeks. I think this is towards the second half of their participation in the program. Let's go ahead and play the video.
Clip them and shoot. Hock 'em and shoot. Clip them and shoot. Kachel! Kachel! Moot. Clip them and shoot. Wheest. 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 Clap. Hock 'em and shoot.
Yeah, so what you can see, if you could see it but not hear it, the mom is telling the daughter TPR commands. So she's telling her to walk, run, turn around, sit, stand up, stop. So she's just going through all these different TPR commands with her daughter. And that was the hope, right, is to be able to get them to interact again within their home together. And so that was just something that, you know, when you're in these situations and you have limited resources or capacity, you really have to be kind of creative, and because, you know, a school or a language nest, there's a lot of regulations that come with that. You have to adhere to WACs and laws and, you know, all this stuff. But for me, I thought, oh, well, if the parents are with them, they're signing a waiver saying my child is my responsibility participating in this. You know, it's a little bit more lenient that way. And I wanted to target TANF families. My hope was at the time to also turn the parents into language teachers in the long run. So as they're participating, they get job search waivers. They still get supported by TANF, and I also paid them an additional stipend on top of that to participate. So that was my goal, was to get them as teachers as well and to bring it back into the home. Okay. Oh, what's this going on here? Okay, so stages 5 and 6. So stage 5 or stage 6 is that there's some intergenerational use within the language, and stage 5 is language is still very much alive and used in the community. So a lot of educational campaigns and language promotion. So on our website, ananlcc.org, we have a lot of resources of articles that demonstrate the cognitive benefits of being bilingual or multilingual. There's a lot of mental health benefits that have been researched with, particularly with Indigenous populations who learn their native language. There's even physical health benefits related to that. Activities and events to increase the status of the language, so like the Cherokee, those dinners honoring their language speakers, and then creating Indigenous language-only spaces within your community. And then stages 1 to 4, creating immersion schools, public school classes, community classes, higher education in the language, work and business conducted in the language. So these types of activities are really, you don't want to, it depends on where your language is at. I don't want to say that these things, like public schools and stuff, if you're doing it now, like I don't want you to be discouraged if it doesn't align with your status. But these things are more effective within these stages. they really want, the research suggests that it really needs to be stable within the home first. And so 4 minutes left. The one thing that I also want to get across is to really take into consideration the time that it takes. So at any stage, whether you're 1 or 8, it's important to account that language revitalization takes time. And it takes approximately, this will change depending on the language, but approximately 2,000 hours of sequence curriculum to attain conversational proficiency. So conversational proficiency is like a 3 or 4-year-old in their first language. So a lot of you who have 3 or 4-year-old children, you know that they're pretty proficient. They can make it through their day and tell you what to do and all that. But it takes 2,000 hours to get just to that level. And so it really does take either providing a living for the people who are, if you're working with adults, I rarely see people become high intermediate or low advanced if it's not their livelihood. If they're just doing afternoon classes or weekend classes, it really, I don't want to say it's not going to happen. I don't like sounding pessimistic, but I haven't seen that work. So really take that into consideration. If you're wanting fluent speakers now, it's what it's going to take. And there's also, you're going to have to choose between quality and quantity. So for me personally, I would choose 2 higher intermediate low speakers, 2 versus 100 basic level speakers. And so you're going to have to make that choice, I'm guessing, with the resources that you have, with the elders that you have, with just your capacity, that you're either going to have to choose quantity over quality or quality over quantity, whichever. But it's really hard to get both of those. So looking at, talking about time and looking at the public school example, if you're in a stage 7 or 8 and you're wanting fluent speakers 2 hours a week, if you're in the class 2 hours a week, and there's 36 weeks in a school year, you're getting 72 hours in the whole academic year. So in order to have a proficient speaker, it's going to take 27 years in a public school system. With the amount of time that's given in a public school system, it's going to take 27 years to reach conversational proficiency. But if you're in a stage 1 to 4 and you're really just trying to increase the status, make it available, support it, that's fine. That's absolutely 100%. Also, if you're doing that and you're in the stage 8, I hope it's not discouraging because, high schoolers that are taking classes, a lot of them later on that's your recruitment, right? So a lot of people who take language classes go on to work in language later on. So it is a good place to generate interest in future language teachers, but the students will not become proficient in the public school system itself. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm almost there. Okay, final thoughts. I recommend focusing on quality over quantity. Your elders are there for support. School efforts, language on the radio or media, newspaper, etc., are best to wait until your language is stabilized. If you have to choose, if you're going to put your energy into something, stabilize your language. Make sure your language is stable first. Put your resources and your energy into that first. Okay, so we're at 1 o'clock. Here's all the resources that I use to compile this along with my own experience. Here's our contact information. Do we have time for questions, Maria? I always think that I'm going to be like short on time, and then I come down to it having to speak at the end.
We could go ahead and have questions. Let me go ahead and unmute everybody.
All guests have been muted. All guests have been unmuted.
Okay, so if you guys have questions, go ahead and can ask them right now. Anybody?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Thank you.
I'm wondering, I'm a resource developer with the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, and I'm not sure where the language would be, There have been language apprentices with elders who speak in a different band, and we've been doing the apprentice model, and now we would like to take our apprentices and have them following a model from the Menominee, pay language training to learn the language intensively for about 9 months, and then create enough second language speakers who are proficient to work in a language nest, like a daycare for babies to 3 years old. I'm just wondering, how many language apprentices do you need before you would move to language nest?
Great question. I think that really depends on the community itself and like the size of it. So like, if you have, like, for example, the community that I live in right now, is a very small tribe. There's only like 400 of them. It's one community. There's not multiple districts. I would say, to start off, 5 would be a great number. For one community, I would say you want at least like 5 language people for a community, a core community, to be able to do what you need to get done. 5 instructors. You want at least 1 or 2 fluent elders, and then you have, a curriculum person and to support your teachers, and then, admin and that type of stuff. But, and then, add a multiplier to that if you have more communities. That's just a guesstimate, a recommendation, but yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? We could probably take at least 2 more. Oh, okay. All right then. Thank you all for joining us today on our webinar for language loss and strategies and identifying suggested interventions. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. Appreciate your attention today, I should say. So we do have a link for surveying, and I think it's up on the screen. So we can go ahead and do that. I will also have the survey link on the website when we post the webinar itself along with the slides. So thank you all, and we hope you have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Stay healthy. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
For guiding
Bye, everybody.